Alright, so Doug Ford just lost his mind over Mark Carney's new trade deal with China, and honestly, I don't blame him for being nervous. But is he right? Or is he just doing what Doug Ford does best, which is yelling loudly while wearing an oversized suit? Let's dive into this absolute mess of a trade agreement and figure out if Canada just made a brilliant strategic move or if we're about to drive our auto industry straight off a cliff. Buckle up, because this is going to get spicy. So here's what went down. Mark Carney, our brand new Prime Minister, just got back from his little field trip to China, and he came home with a shiny new trade deal. The agreement lets up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into Canada at a reduced tariff rate. In exchange, China Pinky swears to lower their taxes on Canadian canola and other agricultural products. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, not if you ask Doug Ford, who immediately had what I can only describe as a full-blown meltdown. Ford went on record saying this deal is going to destroy Canada's auto industry and, wait for it, threatens our national security. He dropped this absolutely wild metaphor about a camel getting its head in a tent, which I guess means once you let a few Chinese EVs in, suddenly your entire garage is full of them? I don't know, the metaphor kind of falls apart when you think about it too hard. But here's where it gets even better. Ford then suggested that Donald Trump, yes that Donald Trump, wouldn't want Chinese spy vehicles crossing the border. Because apparently every BYD electric sedan is basically a rolling surveillance device just waiting to report your Tim Hortons order back to Beijing. I mean, I love a good conspiracy theory as much as the next person, but this is reaching Bond villain levels of paranoia. Now before we dismiss Ford entirely as just being, well, Ford, we need to understand why he's so worked up about this. Ontario is home to Canada's automotive heartland. We're talking thousands of jobs and manufacturing, assembly plants that have been around for generations, and an entire economic ecosystem built around making cars. When you're the Premier of Ontario, the auto sector isn't just important, it's basically your entire personality. So when someone announces a deal that could potentially flood the market with cheaper Chinese electric vehicles, yeah, you're going to freak out a little bit. But hold on, because this is where things get interesting. Charlotte Yates, who runs the Automotive Policy Research Center and knows way more about this stuff than either Ford or probably most of us combined, had some fascinating things to say. She told the Walrus that she wasn't shocked Carney came back from China with a deal. What surprised her was what was actually in the deal. She pointed out that Carney was clearly looking to make some trade-offs, and honestly, Canada didn't have a ton of options on the table. Translation? We kind of needed this deal, even if it's not perfect. Let's zoom out for a second and talk about why Canada was even in this position in the first place. Our relationship with China has been, let's say, complicated. We've had tariff battles, political tensions, and a general sense that maybe relying too heavily on any single trading partner isn't the smartest move. But at the same time, China is a massive market, and they buy a lot of our stuff. Canola farmers, for example, have been getting absolutely hammered by Chinese tariffs. These aren't small-time hobby farmers. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry that's been bleeding money because China decided to make our canola way more expensive. So from Carney's perspective, getting China to ease up on those tariffs is actually a huge win for Canadian agriculture. But here's the trade-off, literally. In exchange for helping our farmers, we're opening the door to Chinese electric vehicles. And not just a couple. We're talking about up to 49,000 of them at reduced tariff rates. To put that in perspective, that's a lot of cars. Now, the EV market in Canada is still growing, and there's definitely demand for more affordable electric options. Chinese manufacturers like BYD have been absolutely crushing it globally with cheaper EVs that still have decent range and features. For Canadian consumers who want to go electric but don't want to drop $70,000 on a Tesla, this could actually be great news. More competition usually means lower prices and better options for everyone. But and this is a massive but, what does this mean for Canadian auto workers? That's the question keeping Doug Ford up at night, probably while he stress eats a double-double and a box of Timbits. If Chinese EVs start flooding the market at prices that Canadian-made vehicles can't compete with, we could see job losses, plant closures, and a general decline in our domestic auto manufacturing. That's not just bad for Ontario. That's bad for Canada's entire economy. The auto sector supports hundreds of thousands of jobs, both directly and indirectly. We're talking about everyone from assembly line workers to the people who run the coffee shop across the street from the plant. So is Ford's panic justified? Well, kind of. His concerns about the auto industry aren't completely unfounded. But his spy vehicle thing? Come on, Doug. That's a bit much. Modern vehicles, whether they're made in China, Germany, or Windsor, all have connected technology that could theoretically be exploited. But framing every Chinese EV as a national security threat is the kind of fearmongering that doesn't really help anyone. It's like saying we shouldn't eat fortune cookies because they might contain coded messages. It's just silly. What's actually fascinating here is that Carney is trying to walk a tightrope. On one hand, he needs to support Canadian industries and workers. On the other hand, he can't ignore the reality that Canada is a trading nation that needs relationships with major economic powers, even complicated ones like China. The deal he struck isn't perfect, but according to Charlotte Yates, it might have been necessary. She basically said Canada didn't have many other options, which suggests that the alternative to this deal might have been even worse. Maybe no deal at all, which would mean continued punishment for our agricultural sector and no relief in sight. Here's another angle to consider. The global shift to electric vehicles is happening whether we like it or not. Every major car manufacturer is investing billions into EV technology, and governments around the world are setting deadlines to phase out gas-powered vehicles. Canada can either be part of that transition or get left behind. If Chinese manufacturers are producing affordable EVs and Canadian companies aren't keeping up, that's a problem we need to address through innovation and investment, not just by keeping foreign competition out forever. Protectionism might buy us some time, but it's not a long-term solution. That said, there's definitely a middle ground here. Canada could use this deal as an opportunity to invest heavily in our own EV manufacturing capabilities. We've got the raw materials, including lithium and nickel, that are essential for battery production. We've got skilled workers and manufacturing infrastructure. What we need is government support, strategic investment, and a plan to make Canada competitive in the global EV market. Just blocking Chinese vehicles isn't going to magically make Canadian EVs better or cheaper. We need to actually step up our game. And let's talk about the canola farmers for a minute, because they're kind of the unsung heroes in this whole mess. These folks have been dealing with punitive Chinese tariffs for years, watching their livelihoods get squeezed while politicians talked about taking a hard line on China. For them, this deal is potentially life-changing. Lower tariffs mean they can actually sell their products at competitive prices again, which means they can keep their farms running and support their communities. It's easy to focus on the auto sector because it's flashy and employs a ton of people in vote-rich Ontario, but Canadian agriculture matters too. A lot. So where does that leave us? Is this deal a disaster or a necessity? Honestly, it's probably a bit of both. It's a necessity because Canada needed to do something to help our farmers and maintain some kind of productive relationship with China. It's potentially disastrous if we don't have a plan to protect and invest in our auto sector at the same time. Carney made a calculated gamble, and only time will tell if it pays off. What we do know is that screaming about spy vehicles and invading camels probably isn't the most productive response. Doug Ford is right to be concerned about Ontario's auto workers. That's his job. But he's also playing politics, trying to position himself as the defender of Canadian industry while taking shots at the federal government. It's classic Doug Ford, and honestly, it's pretty predictable. What would be more helpful is if provincial and federal leaders actually work together to develop a comprehensive strategy for Canada's automotive future. That means investing in EV technology, supporting workers through the transition, and making sure we're not just handing our entire market over to foreign manufacturers without getting something real in return. The bottom line is this. Trade deals are complicated. They involve winners and losers, trade-offs and compromises. Carney's China deal might help our farmers while potentially hurting our auto sector, or it might push Canadian manufacturers to innovate faster and compete harder. We don't have all the answers yet, and anyone who tells you they do is probably selling you something, or running for office, which is basically the same thing. So what do you think? Is Mark Carney a strategic genius who just saved Canadian agriculture, or did he just sell out our auto workers for a bag of canola seeds? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I genuinely want to know where you stand on this. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the absolute chaos that is Canadian trade policy, smash that like button and subscribe to Canadian Insights because trust me, with the way things are going in Ottawa right now, we're going to have plenty more content coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.